Sadar Pranam, friends. So, after a lot of quest and after a lot of waiting, actually, I did start with my YouTube channel. The whole purpose was that I could bring forward a lot of facts and a lot of things which generally get on being hid under the carpet. So, it's very important to remove the carpet. And of course, many of you must be very aware that why I have chosen the name Sadar Pranam, or rather Abhaskar Sadar Pranam. So this also goes back to the time of my childhood where we used to write the letters. We used to start writing the letter with Sadar Pranam. So somehow I do see as my identity, which I have been given from the childhood. And I was always told to wish everyone Sadar Pranam whenever you come across anyone, whomsoever the person may be. So to start off with, I thought of getting into the first subject itself to be something which saw me getting blocked by a lot of people on YouTube, on Twitter. One of them was definitely this term called Hindutva, where there have been a lot of opinion and there have been a lot of myths around the subject called Hinduism and Hindutva. Everyone has tried to peddle their own definitions, and somehow in the popular front, it has been understood that Hindutva is something that is very derogatory and something which cannot be added to the vast spectrum of subject called Hinduism. So the truth is that Hinduism, that is Hindu plus ism, itself is something that is not very apt. It's an oxymoron because you are adding the term ism to Hindu. Somehow it doesn't, we will discuss this in detail. And at the same time, the word Hindutva, which is Hindu plus Twa, is something which really adds a lot of meaning to the term Hindu, actually, because Twa is something which means nest. So, anyways, we will get into the details of it. And we of us have seen that there have been a lot of last year we saw that there was a lot of detailed posts and a lot of things have been written. And still, of course, there's a practice to really demean the term Hindutva. But one meme had become very famous, so wherein, in fact, many eminent people showed the meme and said that Hindu is not equal to Hindutva, or Hinduism is not equal to Hinduism, something of that sort. So it is always said that Hinduism is they made a claim that Hinduism is something which talks about union of various Indian culture, tradition, and diverse roots, and lots of things. On the contrast, they started speaking that Hindutva is something which is homogeneous and it's a racial, territorial category propagated by Savarkar. So somehow their hate for Hindutva also comes for the hate for the personality called Savarkar. And what is very interesting that every one of them does this mistake of attributing Hindutva to Vinayak Damodar Savarkar or V. Savarkar. So he was not the first person to talk about it. It was spoken a lot more earlier. So to understand Hinduism and Hindutva, we need to decode three words. So the three words are definitely, one is Hindu, second is ism, the third is Twa. I have spoken a lot of times about it on Twitter. I have written multiple articles about it as well. But I do see that somehow the voice still has not reached to a lot of people, and somehow still a lot of confusion persists that what exactly the Hinduism is or what Hindutva is. So without wasting much of a time, if I just start to talk about what exactly the term Hindu is, because if we understand Hindu, we will understand Hindu plus ism. And if we understand Hindu, we will also understand Hindu plus Twa. Given the fact that if we understand what is Twa, and if we understand that what exactly ism means. So where does the word Hindu comes from? So there have been a lot of myths around it. that what exactly is there's a myth that Hindu word was given by the Arabs. Many say that it's a very foreign term, and it doesn't make sense to have a term like Hindu as a very indigenous term. They always say that, when you say there have been multiple meanings propagated by people, where they have even said that Hindu is a matter times means a derogatory word for the slaves, and there have been multiple meanings which have been given to the word Hindu. But where actually the word Hindu comes from. So we have got a lot of dogmatic views as well about Hindu. Many people say that it was mentioned in a lot of text of our past. It might have been mentioned because we have lost a lot of texts. We don't know what exactly our texts were. Our lot of texts were burned down as well. Our lot of texts were carried away by the Europeans, and still we have more than 3 million texts which remains untranslated. So if that is the case, we might not be able to know where exactly the word Hindu might have come from. But still, if we look for the evidences which are there with us so far, the most primary evidence. So the first primary evidence what we get is from an inscription of 6th century BC. It happens to be on the northwestern part of India. This inscription was written by Darius I, the Persian king. And interestingly, this man, Darius, also calls himself to be Aryan. He also recognizes himself as Aryan. So this also has given a lot of people a zizza that, maybe that these Persians or the Central Asian people itself were the Aryans. So fair enough, they can have the assumption, but of course the history or the evidence support that. Coming back to the word Hindu, so this is he talks about it in 6th century BC, which is around say 1,000 years before even Islam got evolved. So even this myth about the fact that Hindu term was given by the Arab Muslims is very wrong. It is not very appropriate, because this term was existing at least 1,000 years before the earliest birth of Prophet Muhammad, right? So it has nothing to do with the Arabs, but it was a Persian term. So how did the Persian come up with this term? So there are a lot of multiple theories about it, that where this would have come from and how this would have occurred. One of the theory is that because the Persians couldn't pronounce Sa properly, so that is how the H came, and Sindhu became Hindu. And of course, the way Darius has addressed the word as well, it also seems like the people living beyond the Sindhu are the living beyond the particular river are the Hindu. So he uses the word Handava precisely. So this is where we find the first mention of the term Hindu. Now, one can actually get a hold of this inscription. These inscriptions are actually available online in the archives, and one can easily read about it. So what he exactly writes is this, that the province of Hindush, he calls it as the province of Hindush, and he's referring to the northwestern part of India. The people of India have been actually referred to as Hindu for a very long time. Hindavi. So basically, this was a very this term had to do a lot with the geographical connotation, and necessarily not much to do with the religion per se that time, because many religions what you know today were just evolving back then. They had not even got birth. They were not even in the place, because Christianity was again formed around say 300 to 400 years, or maybe 500 years before the advent of so-called Islam. And we know when Islam occurred into the world. And so, of course, before that, there was no concept of multiple religions and the concept as such. So when Darius saw the people beyond the river Sindhu, he just said that they are the Handavi people. And of course, the faith or the tradition or the practice what these people were following was Sanatan. So the people who lived beyond the river Indus or the river Sindhu were ideally the Sanatanis, because they were the one who were still carrying forward the flame of Sanatan Dharma. So the Hindus have the Dharma, which is the Sanatana, to be precise. Now, there are multiple references about it. If one reads the book Hinduism and Hindutva by Arvind Sharma, so he has actually elaborated it quite well, and the references are very clear at where this term Hindu is coming from. Now, the next thing, what really is something to be inspected about is the term ism. When we add the term ism, we get Hinduism. So, what does ism actually stand for? So, when do we get the first instance of term ism? So, first recorded use of suffixism as a separate word of its own right was in 1680. Before 1680, there was no such word called ism. So, it's only say 400 years ago when for the first time ism was spoken about. By 19th century, around 19th century, it started being used as a term for ideology, and the use of the phrase isms is often was used for as a derogatory term. So anything which people saw that is not mainstream, they used to call it as ism. So in fact, there were various terms like feminism just erupted, right? So when you add ism to feminine, it becomes ism. So alcohol prohibitism. So again, an ism comes. Fourierism, pacifism. So there were multiple ism, socialism. So it was more of an ideology, and it was something which was not seen as a mainstream, which would be something very different. When people saw that it is something very peculiar practice, or they saw that it's not mainstream, it's at times derogatory, then they added the word ism to it. And by then 19th century, it had become a very common practice in USA as well, right? Because the feminism was at peak and the word was in practice. So, and it was added. So when it comes to India, it was in the 19th century, around 1830s, when for the first time the word ism was added to Hindu. So now so now you understand that by 19th century, ism was always added to the acts like feminism, pacifism, Fourierism. There were multiple kind of isms. You don't see ism being added to a lot of the important faiths. You don't see ism being added to Christianity. Christianism is not a very familiar word. So even Islamism is not a very familiar word, but they did add the word ism to Hindus, because for them Hindus were just like a cult, and it was something which was not looking a very mainstream to the Britishers. And then they thought that they can bring it into one singular ideology, and all the people. It was more of like bringing Hindu idea into a very monotheistic idea or something like that when you added some ism. So when you see that, but the way you look at Hinduism is a very wide spectrum. So ism always talk about a particular ideology. So if ism is speaking about a particular ideology, if fixated ideology, then can we ever add the term ism to Hindu? If you add the term ism to Hindu, isn't it that you are now trying to narrow down the wide meaning, the wide pluralistic idea? Isn't it very hypocritical of them then when they say that Hinduism is very pluralistic? So if it has to be pluralistic, anything which has got ism added to it cannot be pluralistic. That's the first dogma of the language, or what you can say that it's an oxymoron. Because at one side you say that Hinduism is pluralistic, in the second stance you want to call it Hindu plus ism. Like we have got so many isms, isn't it? So we have got surrealism, we have got deconstructivism, we have got cubism, and all this idea of the art movement that time, cubism, expressionism, surrealism, everything is very distinct in nature, right? It's not very, and they all have one singular idea, one singular notion. But Hindu idea cannot be singular. It has got multiple facades, it has got multiple meanings, and it has got a lot of diversity. So somehow this ism can never be added to the word Hindu. Like for example, if I always like to take this example that we can't ever say architecturism. You can't add the word ism to architecture because architecture is very broad. But when we have got a type of architecture, that's a deconstructivism. So you can have deconstructivism. So that's the reason why if you cannot add ism to architecture, you can never add ism to even such a broad spectrum like Hindu or Hindu dharma. So you can have an idea of Shaivism, you can have an idea of Vaishnavism to some extent. That's why you can even have Buddhism, but it becomes very tough to call Hinduism as a word. So what it necessarily means that either Britishers didn't understood their own language, that where this ism is coming from, or they didn't understand Hindu, how broad the Hindus is, or they just wanted to make you as derogatory as how feminism was being perceived at that time. So I don't see that there can be any other reason about it. Now, what exactly? And what people also fail to understand is that religion is not equal to dharma. I often say this, and it's an irony of the time that if you don't call Hindu plus ism as a religion as of now, it will be societal act. You can't say that Hinduism is not religion. It has to be seen as a religion. But that apart, if in a literal sense, actually, religion is not equal to dharma. So, in my perspective, religion has always been something which is guided by an institution, which is always guided by a certain doctrine. You need to have a very fixated idea, fixated notion. You can't deviate here and there. So that is when the religion comes into play. But dharma is something very different. Like dharma signifies the behaviors that are considered to be in accord with the Reeth. What is Reeth? Reeth is the order that makes the universe possible. So anything, whatever is happening in the nature is a Reeth. The rules by which the cosmos work is a Reeth. And dharma, which is called the root word three. So what do you hold? Three is the means to hold. So you are trying to hold the Reeth. When you hold the Reeth together, that is how the cosmos needs to work. Then you are talking about a dharma. While in the contrast, religion is an institution which is just trying to tell you to live a fixated way of life, irrespective of how even nature would have been behaving. So even if, say, the sun rises in the east, you will not be told to worship in the east. There can be a doctrine which will not tell you to worship in the east because you are not subscribing the idea of the dharma. That is, you are not trying to hold the Reeth. You are just going beyond it. So somehow religion cannot be considered equal to dharma. And like you never, when you say Raj Dharma, you don't translate it to the king's religion, but you always say the king's duty or the king's righteousness, isn't it? So when it also comes to, like, it's a very interesting example that I always say that ism is something which is temporary. It will always be temporary, which will go by. It's just a movement. But twa is something which is permanent, which is there to stay. Like naritwa. Naritwa is something which is always there to stay. The character what a nari always holds. In the contrast, feminism is something, a movement which is created, which has to work with the policies what these movement makers make, and that is how it's a very momentary kind of thing. So yes, again, coming back to our own understanding of dharma. So in the Bharati understanding, Shaivism, Vaishnavism, Buddhism, Sikhism, etc. are also necessarily not religion, but they are various panth. Panth means the denominations. It's not exactly religion even. So even panth cannot be translated to religion very precisely. Actually, most of the people don't get it, the difference between the panth, dharma, and the religion, and they always try to mix it up. So what do we understand so far? We do understand two basic points. One, Hindu was an ethno-geographical connotation and not religious at all when it was given. It was a virtue of the place that people, the Hindus, were following the Sanatana Dharma. So Hindus are the residents, or the Hindus can be told to be as the residents beyond the river Indus, who follows the dharma, that is Sanatana. So eventually, these all Hindus became the Sanatan Dharmis, because Sanatan Dharma was even existing beyond our land, and that is beyond India. If we dig back into the genetics and various other subjects. Now, we also the other point takeaway what we get is that Hinduism is an oxymoron, though we use it popularly. So we have been using it popularly, and we are ought to use it. If you don't use it, it will be suicidal. Often, so what it does is that the moment you add ism, you are actually degrading the value of the vastness of the Sanatan idea. It just can't be fixated into the small, minute thing like ism. So now, now let's look into understand what exactly does the Hindutva means. So Hindutva is Hindu, Hindu plus Twa. What does Twa means? Twa is a suffix which is used to really speak about the ness or the state of being in something. Like you say that the Naritva is state of being Nari. Like Astitva, we have got a very important word called Astitva, like your existence. When you say Hindutva, Hindutva is all about the state of being Hindu. So irrespective of when it was coined, how can you say that Hindus didn't have a character? Hindu character was always there, irrespective of whether Savarkar spoke of it in 1923 or in 1890s it was spoken by Chandrayat Basu. So it doesn't matter, because the character of Hindus was always there. So it doesn't mean that if Naritva was cited too late, doesn't mean that Nari didn't had a certain feature. They always had a feature. Like if someone has not spoken about the states of matter, right, then will water not have a different states? It doesn't matter, right? But water will definitely go to a solidified form when it goes as ice. Water will definitely go to become vapor if you heat it up. Water will always remain liquid in the room temperature. So it's very stupid when someone say that, Hindutva was coined only in 1923. So though that is also wrong. So it doesn't make any sense, right? And it's very irrelevant. So, so when you add the word pa to Hindu, Hindu is the word which was cited by Darius I, the Persian king. What do you get? Hindutva. So it means that the people living beyond, the character of the people living beyond, or the state of being in the character of the people who live beyond the river Indus. That exactly is Hindutva. So it doesn't matter that when the term was at all quoted or spoken about. So, and there's one more misnomer which exists very widely, that I have seen that people say that Hindutva is something when you take an offense or when you're trying to resist something, this is Hindutva, right? So this is again very wrong. You are giving a fire to those people who who have been bashing Hindutva, and you're giving them a foreground to, like how people try to justify that how jihad is right and all those kind of rubbish bullshit. So when we say that Hindutva is just about the extremism, that also doesn't make sense, because Hindutva was always there, and when Shivaji took over the sword to really kill his enemies, that was also Hindutva. When the Hindus gave the land or the refuge to the Parsis, that exactly was Hindutva as well. So it doesn't matter, like Hindutva is like water, right? If you heat it up, if your temperature goes up, it will just evaporate, right? It will become steam. When you pass it through the lesser temperature, so it will solidify into becoming ice. Again, you are supposed to take hot and cold water based on the climate you are in, isn't it? So, but water is water. Like, it's always the state of that water. It's nothing else is changing. So even when you are trying to fight against something, it is also Hindutva. When you are trying to give place to the refuge to the people, this is also Hindutva. That was also the Hindu character. It was the character of Hindus itself. So it really, doesn't make any sense to really even discriminate Hindutva based on the idea that it will just be the extremism or something like that. And as I told you earlier, that the Hindutva was coined for the first time by Chandranath Basu in 1892, as per the written records or something like that. And but it's completely a myth that actually Savarkar had coined the term. Savarkar just popularized it from 1923, and we get an idea that where the term Hinduism comes from. We get an idea that how Hindutva is coming across. So, what I say, what I always ask people is to really stick to the basics. If you stick to the basics of how the words are evolving or how the words are coming, then the things will start becoming clearer to you. So neither Hindutva is all about extremism, neither Hinduism is greater than Hindutva or something like that. We are using Hindutva just because it has become a popular word. It's nowhere. And even though dharma is not equal to religion, it would be suicidal to say that Hinduism is not a religion, right? So of course we have to recognize Hinduism as a religion. So literally we should know what exactly is the difference between Hinduism, Hindutva, and where the words Hindu comes from. So and it's as I quoted the example, always remember the example of water. It doesn't matter that whether you are gonna have the frozen water, that's ice, or you're gonna use a steam, but it will always be from water. So it doesn't matter whether someone is trying to defend the dharma or whether someone is trying to give refuse to someone, right? Or whether someone is trying to give the dan or something. It's always the Hindutva. It's only the nature of Hindutva, nowhere else. So that is my basic submission, or the first session which I conducted. So that is about Hinduism, Hindutva, and Hindus. I will pick up few questions. I see that there are a few questions, so I'll just pick it up and I'll try to answer them. So this question has come from Rohan, and why our history of Hindu has been corrupted. So this is something, this is what we are to really look upon at right now. Also, if we see that what is happening around in Twitter or what is happening around in everywhere else, of course, there is a vicious agenda which kept our thing hidden, and a lot of distortion happened. But we don't spend enough time in putting across the research, in doing the work. I always say that we are more inclined towards activism. We do lesser activity. So that's one of the reasons we have not put enough effort to really get the things in right order. Having said that, this whole thing that why history of Hindu has been corrupted has got a quite a long history, and majorly the distortion started happening from the 1970s when Nurul Hasan became the HRD minister. That is when actually the many good old projects. There were many good old projects which got started. Like there was one. There's a very important book of civilizational series of R.C. Mazumdar, which was about to be translated in various Indian languages. And this project was to be taken up, but when Nurul Hasan came in, he just scrapped the project. And now the idea was changed. Like till 1970s, actually, our late 1960s, our books were not that bad, right? Of course, they were full of Aryan invasion theory and all those kind of things because not much discoveries has happened that time. But it was not so atrocious against the Hindus. Like when the Nurul Hasan came in, and because he was from the Marxist background, and he wanted to propagate the idea of Marxism. You must understand that Marxism cannot exist without without the class struggle. It's like a mathematical equation. in which if you don't have a certain constant, it can't exist. Similarly, Marxism can't exist without the class struggle. So when in India, there was no such thing called as a class struggle as, as Marx had envisioned for the Marxism to exist and whatnot. His dystopian idea was a bit too imaginary, right? So it was not going to work. So here what they did, they started creating the class struggle very differently. The notion here became caste against the caste, right? The notion became religion against the religion. The notion became employee against the employer, student against the teacher. So the whole history writing was spent more on to create more atrocity literature, or more of a literature which would really create or induce some kind of the class struggle. So this was a major reason why how our history started being get started from 1970s, and eventually we have also not put a lot of effort to really bring in some very fantastic books or somehow counter the problems. Like for example, I'll give you a very strong example that we still see that when we talk about the invasions, we always say that Muhammad bin Qasim did invade, and a 17-year-old kid came from Mecca and just devastated whole of a Sindh. But this guy is said to have come to Sindh in 712 AD, right? And the first literature to talk about the Sindh invasion comes in 892 AD. How much? 180 years after this, the first time it has been spoken about. Now, if that invasion was so impactful, will it really take 180 years to write a story about it? Another interesting point is that bin Qasim is not spoken about in detail till the 13th century, 12th to 13th century. In the Chanchanama is what we get the first record. So 500 years to wait to write about such a glorious hero, is it even possible? No, it's not. Because so it's all rubbish and bunkam that a 17-year-old kid came from Mecca in 712 AD and just devastated the mighty city. It never happened. So what I'm pointing out is that we didn't do enough due diligence even in the past to look at what sources are trying to tell about what. So that's where we have failed. So I don't like to blame others, but I like to take blame on ourselves itself, that we have not done enough homework to really set our narrative in the right order. Of course, a lot of things are happening right now, but it will take some good amount of time, because as you know that the way India grew, our parents were busy in trying to get the right kind of employment and whatnot, right? And the focus on our time was completely about whether, for me at least, it was that either you have to become an engineer or you have to become a doctor, right? There was no focus on the humanities, and our parents definitely were indulged in trying to get better job and something like that. No one was bothered that what's happening. While on the other hand, the elite class had already hijacked the narrative through the humanities and the history and the stuff like that. So when this happened, so when we were standing in the lines of our ancestors, or just a generation above. In fact, we also was in the queue of kerosene oil. They were writing our narratives. So that is the problem. But now that given the situation like internet, given the access of the documents, given the interest and how the economy changed after 1990s, things have changed a lot, and the things will change even further. And I do believe that this thing will not be so that Hindu history would not remain corrupted for at least 2 decades. Everyone cares about NCERT book. Let that be. You first, let us all first take up the job of writing articles, writing books. Things will change. We have to take initiative. We always ask the government to do, but we don't do anything. So yes, a lot of things need to be done from our side. So I'll take one more question. So this question is by Sandeep. Do you think Hindutva politics leading to demonetization of Hinduism? Because seeing many people who hate BJP and RSS have started to hate Hinduism and even Hindus themselves. So see, again, my point is that we are too worried about what is happening in the politics. we are too worried about coming up with analysis that what exactly would be happening. Like, everyone is expert of also this, that how exactly the PMO is behaving, or everyone is suddenly someone becomes an expert of Shastras. Suddenly someone will become. So there are a lot of things which is happening around us. So what is really important, irrespective of what exactly is happening, we need to put a lot of focus on really building our right narrative. And Hindutva politics is not doing any bad or anything good. There's nothing called Hindutva politics, but Hindutva is just the nature of Hindus. So the politics, what the Hindus will play, will be Hindutva politics if I go by the literal meaning. So I don't see anything wrong in Hindutva politics. And as I mentioned earlier, Hinduism itself is a misnomer. It's not a very apt word, but we have to use it because it has become the popular word. You can't just say that, hey, I will not use a Hinduism anymore, or you can't even say that I don't recognize dharma as a religion. With the given circumstances, I know it is wrong, but we have to say, yes, we are the Hindus. Hinduism is our religion, and yes, it's a religion. And there's no problem in Hindutva politics and something like that. Only thing is that we must not forget that one among us will only go into the politics someday, right? So it's just a normal soul like any of us who will be sitting in the parliament someday, or someday someone else will be cribbing about the person that he's doing Hindutva politics. You might be sitting there and you will be criticized about. So this will keep on going on. We have to focus on what we are good at. Let the politicians play the politics. Yeah. So the question is by Vijay. Do you hope that this government can do decolonization of our education system? Again, the similar answer that uh, I was also fed up with HRD. I have been, I do openly say that HRD has been the most inactive kind of the ministry for whole of a Modi regime, or rather the period. But still, the whole point is that have we done enough, right? So we have not done enough, right? Of course, NCRT books they should have changed. They have not changed. But will we really keep on waiting for the government to change the NCRT books? Like for example, of course, Romila Thapar was in the writing committee of the NCRT books, but she also wrote the book called Early History of Early India, right? So can't we have more books like that from the side? People like me, for example, people of my age are not gonna pick the NCRT books. They're gonna take that Romila Thapar's book of the early Indian history, right? So we need to really look at what exactly is happening, and we need to put our efforts. And at the same time, yes, there has to be some foundation corrections from the root. When I say foundation corrections, the kids need to be groomed in a way that they get inclined towards the dharmic ideas, or rather what is the Indic ideas. So, like for example, I always say that if a kid is being taught calculus or being introduced about the calculus for the first time, even if it's not there in NCRT book, the teacher should say that what exactly the calculus was actually discovered by, created by the Indian mathematicians in Kerala, and not before that some foundation was laid by Aryabhatta, right? So even if it, so what this will do, this will create a fire, this will ignite something. We are expecting the boom to happen without the ignition, right? Everyone has problem that why Modi ji praises Gandhi so much, right? I know everyone has, but have we brought enough literature to really break the popular opinion? No, we haven't, right? So a politician will only pick the popular opinion. He will not be. So we have to do a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of things which are impeding from our side. So that is it about it. So I think that I can hold the session for today. Maybe next time I see that there were some glitches in the audio and the stuff like that, but I'm sure that the next time we'll be able to fix it. It was my first live broadcast, so I was a bit clueless also about whole of a thing. I hope that things will be better. and at the same time, let's hope that we can do something better. I'll just pick one more question which had come. I see that it's. Do you suggest we put forth dharmic and Indic ideas as the moment you show inclination towards Hinduism? And we're frozen out of uncool. So that's okay. It's not about being cool or uncool, but it's about how do you carry something, right? It's also about like what is cool. Cool is nothing, but it's very contextual. Like right now, until we were not spoken, like for example, how Ayurveda is being hijacked, right? Yes, of course, they laughed upon us about the charcoal in the toothpaste, use as a toothpaste, stuff like that. There were a lot of things, but aren't they, are today commercializing it so badly? So it's not about cool or uncool, but the whole idea is that we have to be proud of who we are. And of course, one may not recognize it, but from 2014, confidence has come to the people and they have really becoming vocal and they see being Indic as a very cool quotient. Now, even the commercial market is moving towards it. Being an architect, I can tell you the demands for the design which come, that is very much Indic. People are looking to do Indic stuff. They see that if you go to the resource of the current time, you'll see that they are trying to replicate the Indic ideas, whether it's Indic material, whether it's Indic concept of Vastu Shastra, or there are a lot of things. So things are really changing. We need to do a bit of stuff. The things will be cool and everything is cool. In Indic idea, everything is cool because we are the most, we have been told to be the most tolerant people, but that against tolerant or is a very a big misnomer or something like that. But yes, we are the cool people. We do the best of the stuff. We were the most advanced, right? If you look at the sastras, our things have been most advanced. If you look at our artifacts and the archaeological evidences, they really speak of how cool and how advanced we were. Cool is nothing, but it's just being advanced. Like when the whole of a world was kind of living in a stone age, we had perfect grid iron pattern Indus Valley civilization, right? So, and Indus Valley civilization is now dating back to Ancient Age. We were very, very advanced, whether it's about trading with the Rome and trading with Egypt, Mesopotamia. We had best of the naval system. We had the best of our naval architecture was one of the best. So there are a lot of cool, or rather the advanced things to speak about, but we have not spoken because our parents have also not spoken and we are also not doing it. This needs to be done. Of course, things will be cool and all will be great. So I will put a halt to it for the day. Thank you so much. Adal Pranam to all of you.